Hi, my name is Basil Job, and for my Year 11 chemistry project, I'll be discussing why we need crude oil. It is important to understand this topic because it is what shapes the world we live in and will no doubt influence our future. Crude oil plays a major role in the world's economy and has shaped our society. From the roads we travel on to the fuels in our cars, crude oil is a key factor in our lives. In this video, I'll be delving deeper into the slippery topic that is crude oil and tell you what actually is this substance, how is crude oil produced and refined, are we running out of crude oil, and what do we do if we run out?
So, what exactly is this crude oil? Crude oil is a term used to describe unprocessed oil. Crude is not a specific type of oil, but rather several types of oils that vary in their color, composition, and consistency. Unlike most chemical solutions, crude oil is not a single chemical compound. It is a complex mixture of molecules consisting of compounds formed from hydrogen and carbon atoms, called hydrocarbons. Just like water has a boiling point, the different compounds that form the crude oil has its own unique boiling point. To make it simple, the more carbon atoms that are present in a hydrocarbon, the higher the temperature for it to boil and vaporize. It is because of this phenomenon, crude oil is able to refine and be produced into a variety of products. Depending on the mix of hydrocarbons, crude oil can be categorized as light or heavy and sweet or sour. The larger the molecule, the heavier the crude becomes. The sweetness is dependent on its sulfur content. The sweeter the crude, the lower the amount of sulfur. How is crude oil produced and refined? The oil deposits we currently use were formed millions of years ago when dead marine organisms sunk to the bottom of the ocean. They were then suppressed under sedimentary rocks for an extended period of time. After the influence of vast amounts of pressure and heat, the said organisms were transformed into the substance we now call crude oil. For this reason, we refer to crude oil as a fossil fuel. After the crude oil is set, geologists and scientists use instruments such as gravimeters and magnetometers to detect where these locations are situated. Crude oil is found in geological formations called reservoirs, and the oil is extracted through drilling, a well. Once collected, the oil is transported by pipe, train, ship, and even planes to different refineries around the world. A refinery is an industrial plant that refines crude oil into its petroleum products. Once in the refinery, the crude oil is heated up and pumped into a large fractionating column. This stage is called fractional distillation and separates the different components of crude oil. The column has a gradient. It is extremely hot at the bottom and cooler towards the top. Once inside the column, the long-chained hydrocarbons begin to condense back into liquid and is collected at the bottom of the column. The rest of the molecules rise up the column and make its way to a specific tray which cools down the vapor, allowing it to become liquid again. These separated liquids are now called fractions. Some examples of the different types of products collected in the columns include petrol used to fuel cars, naphtha used in the manufacturing of chemicals, kerosene used in aircraft fuel, diesel used to fuel trucks and heavy vehicles, and bitumen and asphalt used to make roads. Are any countries running out of crude oil? As of 2019, research suggests that currently there is a guaranteed 54 more years of crude oil supplies for our society to use. However, as seen by the graphs, as years pass by and our world continues to industrialize, the consumption rates of crude oil will also increase. This chart represents the countries where most of the oil reservoirs are situated, and also those countries who lead in the oil trading industry to other nations. There are many smaller countries like Malaysia, Burma, and Cambodia who do not have much natural oil reserves, so for them, crude oil products have to be imported from other countries. India, much like these smaller countries, do not have a large natural oil reserve. However, they do have many trade partners and source their crude oil ready for refining from the world's largest oil well, situated in Saudi Arabia. What keeps India in the oil business, however, is that it being the home of the world's largest refinery, producing over 1.2 million barrels of oil per day. According to Tom Phillip, a market analyzer, China only has around 12 to 17 billion gallons of fuel left over. At first, this may seem like a large number, but China is the most populous country in the world, with over 1.4 billion people, and is also responsible for most of the manufacturing of plastics around the world. It is estimated that China's oil supplies will run out in the next 12 years if nothing is done.
Fun fact, did you know in Saudi Arabia, the oil prices are so low that you can buy a bottle of water for the same price as a full tank of fuel for your car?
What will happen if our world runs out of crude oil? At first, a world without oil seems hard to imagine. Will our society be torn apart? Will our Earth turn into a Mad Max or Wall-E type reality? Well, no. At first, let's focus about the negatives. As a result of humanity running out of crude oil, we assume that tens of thousands of jobs will be lost as refineries and other oil-related jobs will cease to function. This will be a large cause of our economic downfall, similar to the 1920 Great Depression. Over 1.4 billion fossil fuel consuming cars will be useless and most likely scrapped. Our human society will have to find a new way of life. However, there is still hope. Already we have seen the rise of electronic cars which do not require any crude oil based or fossil fuel to run. Recycled products have become increasingly popular and do not use fossil fuel in its manufacturing. Inevitably, when oil runs out, our society will be hugely affected, but hopefully, by that time, we have adjusted and adapted our new way of living.
To conclude, you should have all learnt what crude oil is. Crude oil, of course, is the mixture of hydrocarbons. We understand how important crude oil is in our lives and our future. We have learnt the sophisticated ways of extracting, refining, and producing everyday items from crude oil, and the effects it has on the global economy and our society. Without crude oil, our world will be quite different, and it is your choice and your decision to make sure this does not happen.
The web pages, videos, and articles I used to help support this video was mostly government authorized. This meant that it was a secure and valid source of information without any bias. However, some articles that I used were written by fuel companies, so there could have been some bias, as some stated that their way of refining was faster. The evidence for this is that if crude oil was to run out, this was really hard to find because you cannot exactly predict what's going to happen in the future. So educated guesses and analytical reports had to be taken and read to estimate. Thus, this section is not completely valid, as our world is so ever-changing.